French society was divided into three separate pieces: the clergy, which were the kings and queens and their subordinates; the nobility, which were the rich and generally influential people in French society; and then there was everyone else. Everyone else was starving and poor, and the nobility and clergy were not really doing anything about it. In fact, France was in financial ruin due to the king's lavish lifestyle and the insane expenses of the 7 Years' War. So, eventually, the peasants began to question the king and his ideals. During this time, the king levied extremely high taxes against the peasants, making them even angrier, while the nobility and clergy were being taxed very little. Eventually, people began to riot and steal bread, as the taxes made them starve. The Estates General was called in to help mitigate the crisis and save France. The Estates General was unfair because each piece of French society got one vote, and usually the nobility and clergy would often vote against the peasants 2-1. So the nobility and the clergy often controlled all aspects of France, while the commoners, who made of 80% of the population, got very little representation. So the commoners made their own government called the National Assembly. Eventually, all of the unfairness made the commoners even angrier, and they eventually got extremely violent, which all culminated into the French Revolution. The peasants and National Assembly decided to form their own militia and raid the Bastille and take all of the weapons inside. Eventually, the leaders of the National Assembly adopted the Declaration of the Rights of Man and the Citizen, which laid the groundwork for the rest of the revolution. However, this was not enough. The king lived just south of Paris, away from the peasants, and the peasants decided to confront the king directly and raid his palace. Eventually left with no other choice, the king had to abdicate and forfeit most of his power to the new revolutionary government. The king even tried to escape in disguise, but was caught and brought back to his palace. Eventually, there was a split in people who wanted the king gone and people who wanted the king to have limited power. This culminated in the Revolutionary Army firing on fellow revolutionaries. Eventually, the countries close to France feared the spread of revolutionary ideas, so they declared war against France in an attempt to restore monarchy. The government eventually decided to strip King Louis of all his power, and he was sent to live in a jail. The French Republic was established, and the new revolutionary ideas were written into law. Eventually, the other European powers were beginning to take more French territory, so they sent more soldiers there to stop it. The other European powers tried to restore King Louis to the throne, so they decided to behead him with a new French invention called the guillotine. This would be a key symbol of the French Revolution. Eventually, the other regions of France did not like the new government and began to revolt, but were eventually suppressed. The British Navy took a city in southern France, and the French sent Napoleon Bonaparte to go and deal with it. This was the start of Napoleon's military career. Eventually, the radicals took complete control of the government, and the government was now under their complete control. The radical government began trying to get rid of enemies of the revolution and started to guillotine people in mass, even for the most petty of reasons. Eventually, the Queen of France was guillotined too. Eventually, all of this guillotining got a little too much, and the council eventually sent the leader of the radicals, Robespierre, to the guillotine. Eventually, the moderates took control and guillotined the radicals right back. Eventually, the royalists tried to take back control, but Napoleon stopped them.